All right, so thank you to our individual speakers for this incredible presentations. I thought they were truly inspiring and eye-opening, and I know I definitely learned a lot, and I hope you guys are feeling the same way. And so now it's time to shift gears in a little bit in our spotlight section and move on to our Design to Divest and Allyship panel, which I actually have the honor of moderating this one. And we will be talking about the task force of Design to Divest, lessons in creating an inclusive and more diverse work culture and work environment, which will be presented by a couple of representatives from Ethel's Club, and the important topic of allyship. I'm so excited to be introducing our incredible speakers that will be schooling us today on these important topics. Please welcome Naj Austin, the amazing founder and CEO of Ethel's Club, Vanessa Newman, the head of branding at Ethel's Club by day and DJ by night, as well as the amazing Lindsay Logan, founder of Current Theory Studio.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Let's see. So everyone here. All right, everyone's here. So let's just jump right into it. I would really like for you guys to tell us a little bit about yourselves.
Sure, I can jump in first.
Yeah.
With everyone. My name is Naj Austin. I use the pronoun she, her. I am the founder and CEO of Ethel's Club, the first social and wellness club designed with people of color in mind. We originally had, I guess we still have, a physical clubhouse located in Brooklyn, New York, where people can apply to become members to gain access to our events, culture, and community. Due to COVID, we launched an online platform that folks around the world can join, which has been really exciting, where they can do the same things. We have events, different clubs. We actually have a design club we just launched this week. So that's what I do. I make equitable, inclusive spaces for Black people and people of color.
Awesome. All right, next, Lindsay or Vanessa, one of you guys.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Vanessa Newman. My pronouns are they, them. I also work at Ethel's Club. I've been working with Naj since day one. My role is kind of twofold. My main responsibilities are overseeing kind of the programming strategy and curating all of the events and experiences that folks engage with when they come into our clubhouse, both thinking through it on our members' end, but also engaging with brand partnerships and bringing external folks into the clubhouse as well as just kind of overseeing and assisting with developing the brand strategy as we've grown and scaled so much over the past really not even a year actually of being open. So and then outside of that, my background is in brand strategy. I'm kind of new to the world of graphic design, but in being self-taught, I've been curating my own spaces around design education and bringing Black and POC designers together. And most recently in the past month, I've launched an initiative called Design to Divest, which is the initial heart and root of it was creating a space for designers to design for Black people in need, and it quickly scaled to a community of over 400 designers, and we're now really centering what it looks like to be an organization that is entirely Black-led and centering and prioritizing the demands of Black designers and using our non-Black allies in the group to really push those along. So.
Awesome, that's great. Lindsay, what about you?
Hi, I'm Lindsay. I'm originally from Baltimore, Maryland, and now I'm based here in San Diego, where I run a small creative studio called Current Theory. I'm also a self-taught designer, an independent designer, but I have a background in tech and PR with a specific focus in helping artists and healers create their visual brand identities. I specialize in graphic design, Squarespace web, print as well, but I'm transitioning more into UX work. So I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. So as we were putting this conference together, I was seeing Design to Divest pop up as a resource in terms of disrupting design. Can you guys shed more light on this initiative?
Yeah, I actually made a little presentation. Well, our team actually made it a presentation.
Awesome.
So I can kind of speak to it. Give me 1 second to share. All right, let's see here. How do I, nope, that's the wrong share. All right, I'm like, okay. Can everyone, you guys can see my screen?
Yep.
Cool. So essentially, Design to Divest, we're a Black-led task force of designers dedicated to centering Black designers, decolonizing the design industry and design education, and designing for Black lives. So how this started was, as I mentioned, I'm a self-taught designer. And at the beginning of stay at home and, COVID, I was really thinking about how I want to use my time now that I had more time to really claim and shape for my own. And I knew that I wanted to spend intentional time making sure that I was practicing design every week. I didn't want that to go to the wayside. So I started a little get together called Rise in Design, where sometimes it was 3 designers, sometimes it was never more than like 10 folks. We would get together at 9 a.m. on Friday mornings and just design for 45 minutes around anything. It might be around like something that made us happy or a song that we liked. And then we were doing that for about a couple months. And after George Floyd's death and Breonna Taylor's death and the height of protest, it felt kind of silly to be designing around something that didn't matter when it felt like there was so much to design for. I had a lot of friends who were putting together protests, and they were talking about there are so many kids in the streets and they don't know what to do if they're tear gas. They don't know what to do if they get arrested. And folks were thinking about how do we distribute this type of information. And so I said, hey, I already have a group of designers that meet every week. Why don't we just come together and design for these things instead? And so I shifted it around and I put it on my Instagram, and I really thought it'd be a few extra folks might be interested. And the post ended up going viral, and we ended up having over 500 people sign up to be a part of the program, which I did not expect at all. And I guess what I didn't expect either was that it was mostly not Black people. My whole work has kind of been centered around building spaces and communities for Black people. So it was kind of a shock to me to kind of see this thing go viral and enter in all these new communities of folks that I didn't really know. So our Slack community now is currently 443 members strong, but there's about only 30 of us that are Black, so about 8%, which, in an unfortunate way is a lot better than the current design industry. So I'm glad that our ecosystem is slightly more on the progressive end, but it definitely made me pause for a minute. And when I had the initiative out, I was like, okay, it doesn't really, make sense anymore now that we have over 400 people that want to help. I don't even have at this moment that many Black people signing up to receive that amount of design help. Not saying we aren't out there, but the number of folks who are willing to help were much greater than the number of requests that I was getting. But I think it also asked a larger question of, I think I had to question, what were all these people doing before this moment, right? Like, were they allies before? Did they ever offer design help before? Do they know Black designers? Have they tried to hire a Black designer at their agencies, or have they tried to make design education accessible to other designers? And so it made me pause and think, well, who should be designing for Black people right now? And so we kind of expanded quickly into a larger initiative than what it was initially set out to be. So we are an entirely Black-led group. All the Black designers make up our leadership. And so we're currently working to create a list of Black demands for the design community. And our goal is to amplify that. The work we do centers on listening to Black people and Black designers. We've been doing design assignments and giving them to folks to amplify things that are going on, the needs and the work of Black people right now. And just having folks, we also, we do weekly resource shares. So every week we assign readings or podcasts or YouTube videos to listen to or watch and engage with. So folks in our group are really listening to and beginning to decolonize their mind and their design practice through Black perspectives. We do design for Black people in need. Right now, that is solely the Black designers who are taking on that responsibility. As we, I develop and grow the non-Black designers and allyship. And then additionally, through all of this and through our Slack community, we're constantly engaging in critical conversation around decolonization and decentering whiteness. So what we kind of did initially, as it was supposed to be a design initiative, instead of designing specifically for Black people who need it, or at least for the larger group, instead of designing for Black people who need it, we've been kind of coming up with design assignments each week for allies and Black folks to design around. So these are just a few of the examples that we've done in the past month since launching. We just had our 4th meetup this past Friday. So our first one, we had folks come up with a shareable template on how to learn about reparations and create some sort of template or pledge on how to make ongoing reparations to Black people in the Black community. We created designs around Breonna Taylor's, around creating action and justice for Breonna Taylor as the cops who murdered her still haven't been fired or arrested or had any action taken against them. We work to advocate for Juneteenth being both a federal holiday, but also with very specific actions to members' jobs or educational institutions to have Black people have Juneteenth off. We actually had a great example there where we had one of our members who is a design student at Carnegie Mellon design a pledge, and she got over 80 students to sign it. And then she took that to the president of her university and was like, hey, we don't have Juneteenth even recognized on our school's calendar. What's up with that? How can we change that? And this past week, we were designing to amplify different Black-led organizations, such as the Okou Project, which supports Black trans lives. So that's kind of what we've been doing, and where we're going is we're essentially looking to launch a sort of a subscription-based community that allies can opt into and subscribe to for a monthly fee each month, which will go to investing in Black designers, cultivating Black leaders, making sure that Black folks who are designing for Black people right now aren't doing it for free, as we often have to do the labor of undoing and solving racism for free all the time, and also making education and tools accessible to Black designers as well. As we've seen, there's a big lack of getting of making that education making it accessible. So working to do that. In addition, we're trying to just make design education more accessible, not just by investing financially, but figuring out how to really tap into Black youth communities and really just change the narrative that so many Black people are designers. Like every day we have to design new solutions to navigate systematic racism. That in itself is design. Like Black people are naturally designers. Everything that we do in a sense is design. And so really kind of expanding what design even means, it's beyond visual, it's beyond graphic, and really like showing the range of it and empowering Black people and Black youth to believe that they can be designers and have a successful career path in that way. We're also, creating a comprehensive Black-centered design education and design history. We're trying to create a lexicon of language that centers Black designers, where Black people and non-Black people can learn about design, and from jump, there are Black narratives and Black examples and Black references already there. And then, lastly, we're looking to just rebuild the design industry and the culture so that more Black designers are hired, mentored, retained, and promoted into positions of leadership, but not just leadership, but also ownership, right? Because I think that it's not just about getting Black people to succeed in white spaces. I think it's also about getting Black people and empowering Black people to start their own firms, their own agencies, their own studios, and having non-Black people support that as well, right? So for the allies in our group, that kind of looks like, listening to the Black people in our group as leaders, as directors, as creative directors, as art directors, putting their money where their mouth is, right? being a part of this intentional community and not just doing that, and subscribing to it literally in the same way that, you know, if you can subscribe to an HBO or Spotify, you can subscribe to supporting Black lives, right? It looks like people who are comfortable with showing up every single week and saying, I just read this article and now, you know, my mind is blown and I don't know what I'm doing and I don't know how to do it better, but I'm figuring it out, right? Every single day. And being ready to show up and do that, doing and undoing every single day. And lastly, you know, I think allyship really looks like a surrendering of power, right? It looks like being prepared to give up your job, give up hiring your friend, give up nepotism, give up your money, and being able to shift those resources so that they can support Black lives and really change the power dynamic. So yeah, and I just wanted to reference this quote, I think that kind of sums it up too, which was from Cheryl Z. Miller's article, Black Designers Still Missing in Action, which was a follow-up article to her 1987 article, Black Designers Missing in Action. And this was actually her quoting her husband, but it was, the new palette must own the income statement and balance sheet and not just be salaried. Owning power is essential towards advancing corporate sensitivities and developing diverse sensibilities in the marketplace. And so I think, you know, this isn't just about getting Black designers into a white space where white power is still centered. I think this is a larger conversation and initiative of actually shifting the power dynamic. And that's what it is. Like, we're designing to literally divest from a white centered and white led design industry. And I think that really kind of connects back to Naj's work, because what Naj is doing with Ethel's Club is, you know, she has created a space in which whiteness is completely decentered and divested from, and she's doing an amazing job of owning and taking power in both physical and digital space. So that's a bit about Design to Divest. You can reach out to me about it if you're interested in learning more. You can fund it if you want. And you can also follow me on Instagram and shoot me a DM if you want to connect further on Design to Divest, design, Ethel's Club, DJing, etc. in general. So that's a bit about me and what we're doing.
Yeah, and we'll be sure to put your links and everything in the Slack channel so people can reach out to you and donate. But Vanessa, you really took the words right out of my mouth on what I was going to explain that I really like about Design to Divest, and the whole aspect of there's so many actions that we have to do to divest white supremacist structure. And I love how you highlighted Ethel's Club, because I really feel that it's a company that can really speak to creating more inclusive and diverse work cultures and environments, and that companies can take a lesson from. And I actually would love to hear more about that. Naj, if you can speak more on Ethel's Club and what you're doing.
Sure. So a lot of what Vanessa spoke about in regards to stepping away from reformation and stepping towards rebuilding is everything that Ethel's Club is built off of. It was an idea that was born out of frustration of not seeing myself reflected, frustration and not seeing my community reflected, whether it be in publications, in brands and companies. And I wondered, you know, could there be a world that is led by Black people that is particularly invested in our well-being and joy? Can that exist? Should someone build it? I don't think at the time I was necessarily thinking it was me. It was much more of just a complaint I had and a frustration. And it started to build up in a way where I thought this needs to exist. You know, we need to be as centered as other communities, and we need to be able to exist outside of the white gaze, which we are so often put in the middle of. So I started Ethel's Club in January of 2019, basically with an Instagram post prompting the idea of a space that existed in New York City that centered and celebrated what it meant to be Black and or a person of color. I, at that time, did not have a clear idea of exactly what that was, but I knew one thing, which was that it should be beautiful and heavily focused on design. I did not want that to be an afterthought. I thought that we are so rarely afforded beautiful spaces that are built around and for us that should be a crucial tenet in what I was building. I brought on 2 amazing designers onto the team. One is Shannon Maldonado, who led all of our interior design inside the Clubhouse, and Annika Hansina-Zora, who led all of our branding design. And when I talked with both of them, the 2 things I focused on were, it should be a brand that is centered around our joy. I feel like so often our stories are of plight and sadness and despair, and we are so much more than that. And I wanted this to be a place outside of that, that allowed us to rest and to celebrate and to have fun, and to be reflective in that way. And so both of them did an amazing job of bringing that to life. Shannon, inside of our physical Clubhouse, there are a couple of different nods that she built in that speak to reflection. So we have about 5,000 square feet located in Brooklyn, and throughout the space we have used a lot of mirrors. And the point, the reasoning behind that was to make sure that you literally felt seen when you were there, and that it was a reflection of the community and not so much the items inside. Ethel's Club is not about the beautiful couches we have or their art on the walls, it's about the people. And so we wanted to make sure that that was always seen and felt while you were there. And outside of the mirrors, the entire space was sourced, obviously by Shannon, who identifies as a Black woman. And a lot of the items were founded or created by Black people and or people of color, from the art to the plants to the couches, our reupholsterer, our electrician, our woodworker, metalworker. We wanted it to feel embedded in the soul of the community, and that's something we've always worked towards. A lot of that framework is that same divesting framework, divesting outside of traditional white structures that don't necessarily give you the tools to center Black folks who are doing a variety of work. And so we had to inevitably create our own database of people who are creating beautiful things around the world, because it was so difficult to find. We opened Ethel's Club in November. We were only open 4 months before COVID happened. And in that time, we learned one major thing, which is that Black people and people of color were really excited to join our circular economy that allowed for them to step outside of the white, world that we all live in. So outside of just the physical Clubhouse, inside of it, we had a boutique that carries items created by people of color and Black people. So again, that idea of trying to create like a one-stop beautiful solution where you don't have to, you can opt out, and it's actually a really good and easy way to do that. We launched a digital Clubhouse in March after COVID happened. And that space is the exact same thing we're building in real life. Obviously now we have members as far as the Netherlands, which is very cool. And again, we've learned that there are people all over the world, including the Netherlands, who are looking for spaces where they're centered. And my job is to continue building a way so that they feel that throughout their daily life. Right now, we can show up in a very small way, but our goal as a company is so that when you wake up in the morning, through all the way until you sleep at night, you are being centered and celebrated. And we want to build, again, a beautiful design-forward solution for that.
That's amazing. And so I have a question for you as an entrepreneur, and this question is open to everyone on the panel. And I kind of want to speak to the opposite of divesting in terms of investing. Can you speak to more and tell companies why they should invest in diversity?
I feel like if that is something that people need to be told, I feel like that is a giant red flag. Mm-hmm. It should be something so inherent in your belief that it should not be something that is being learned in 2020. So as a question that would concern me, and I would almost think that I would not want them to diversify in whatever way that means, because something that I think about a lot is Black people and people of color having to live and exist in spaces that are not safe for them. So how can we as a company build those tools down the line? But I think right now, if your biggest question is how do we diversify, I don't know. It doesn't fill me with joy. I think it's there are just so many tools already. I think that if you haven't done that work, I don't know if you should. is my hot take. You know, I don't know if a Black person or a person of color would thrive in that space. And that's what keeps me up at night is, can I create products and spaces where Black people and people of color can thrive, not just be there, where they can really become their full selves, and have that recognized. And I think if a company is not willing to do that in all the ways that means, I don't know, I guess is my answer.
Yeah, that's a really good answer because it's true. We don't know.
I would say, I'll speak to that a little bit. I would say that divesting is the investment, right? I mean, part of what Vanessa was talking about with Design to Divest specifically is that, you know, white people or these white structures need to start surrendering their power in order to build those new structures that are inclusive and welcoming to Black designers and Black creatives. So, you know, it's kind of like, not a catch-22, but one hand, you know, feeds the other, and that if you're divesting, you're necessarily investing as well. I don't know if that maybe helps Naj, or, you know, if that speaks to what you were saying. Like, yeah, if a company's not already focused on divesting, then they're also not investing either. So
100%. And I think the point where I draw, like, the thing that I have a problem with is the folks who are recognizing it today when it's existed forever. And for the people who've been putting in the work, I think that work is recognized, and yes, I think they could always do more, but I think the people who have, you know, as of a month ago, realized that there are these power structures and that, you know, there's a food chain and Black people are at the bottom of it. I draw, I guess I'm not sure what to do with those people. And I don't spend a lot of time thinking about those people, but everyone who's kind of understood the problems that and the powers that be, we obviously work with a lot of companies that offer memberships to their employees, and have reached out to us to do other kinds of programming. And so I think it's taking a step and, like you said, divesting from the normal places they would have put money and investing it elsewhere. So I totally agree with that.
Mm-hmm. And I also want to say, you know, I think that we're getting to this point where that diversity and inclusion as a concept itself is having its own reckoning, right? Where it's like diversifying often means sprinkling non-white people into white environments. And most companies' diversity goals are dismal, right? I mean, I've had conversations with companies where they'll ask me, you know, what would diversity look like? And I'm like, 40% Black people, right? 40%. Now I'm not even asking for like 50, right? I'm just like put 40% Black people, too high. What about like 15? You know? And I think the thing about diversity and inclusion is inclusion means we're including you in our whiteness. When we think about diversity, we think about how do we add diversity to a white space. We're not making it less white. We're not making like in terms of whiteness, right? We're still centering whiteness. We're still, you know, we're including Black people, we're including people of color in our white culture, in our white system. And I think that is no longer, it's no, that should not be, I think that's outdated, quite frankly. And I think that, you know, when we think about how do we create diverse structures, you know, I think it's less now about how do I get a Black person to work for me, and it's more about, you know, what makes me worthy of even having a Black person want to work here. I think to Naj's point, so many of us now, you know, who are now being approached because everyone's realizing that they need to hire a Black person. Black folks are at an advantage right now, because now we get to say, well, all of you want to hire me because you need me. So what makes your company best for me. And I think to Naj's point, you know, if this was just a realization to you, you're already in the red. You're my least, you're my least, you know, favorable option. And I think that, you know, companies, before even thinking about diversifying, companies to take a step back and say, before we even think about, you know, creating an environment where Black people will want to work here or even learn here, right? Because I think I'm even thinking about education, right? Like, before you know, Black students are choosing to design schools, before they're choosing their jobs, you know, I think that these white companies and white structures and institutions need to think about what can we do to decenter whiteness in this space? How can we create a space that Black people want to work at, that, you know, how can we create around them and their needs to retain them? Because it doesn't matter if you hire a Black person and then they just face a bunch of microaggressions until they fire and they, you know, they quit in under a year or get fired, right? What we don't want to do is we don't want to create a bunch of people bum rushing to hire Black people because of diversity. And then this happens and there's another uprising. And then we all come out and say, they treated me horribly. And then all the CEOs get removed from their positions. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants that. We don't want it. Y'all don't want it. And so I think when we think about diversity, you know, I think there's a whole new word, and I don't know what that word is yet per se, or maybe it is thinking about divesting or, you know, decentering environments or whatever the case is. But yeah, I think we're now at like a new, there's a whole new approach, I think, to creating equitable environments.
And so in your presentation, I think something that really piqued my interest was, and what this panel is also about, is about allyship. And I kind of want to shift gears towards that. And I just kind of want to start with the general definition of allyship, right? And what does that mean to all of you?
Yeah, I can go first. To me, you know, as a non-Black aspiring ally, I think, you know, there's a lot of ways that you can the allyship embodies, right? Like, there are a lot of ways you can be an ally, but one of the common denominators or common themes in my experience is showing up, but also showing up to get uncomfortable. You know, so it's not just, you know, having those difficult conversations, but it's also, you know, potentially sacrificing your job as a result of them. It's, you know, surrendering opportunities, knowing when a project isn't for you, knowing, you know, when a Black perspective is better suited for a client that's approaching you with work, and also acknowledging and confronting those racist systems on a constant basis. You know, whether or not we're doing it consciously, we are living and breathing in these racist systems. So allyship to me is really repeatedly showing up and revisiting that discomfort, questioning ourselves as much as the structures and institutions that we're living in, for the sake of centering Blackness, at whatever cost, you know, that is to the ally at hand.
Yeah, I don't think about allyship often, I'll be honest. Most of my day and life are centered around Black people and people of color. But when I do, it's very much what Lindsay said, which is about surrendering both power and money. And I think that can be applied to every vertical, every industry, everything on earth, in terms of allowing for access. It's accessibility, I think. And the more that you can grant that in whatever way that may be, any way that you can give that up to a Black person or a person of color, I think is a step in the right direction.
Yeah, I second that. I think, you know, and similarly, prior to a month ago, I was not thinking about or even interacting with allies in that sense. But I agree. I mean, I think as I've been, you know, kind of led into thinking about and leading allies and aspiring allies, I think exactly that. I mean, I think it's allies need to be thinking about what do Black people need and how can I give it to them, and not question it, not question whether I think it's right or wrong. It's like, hey, this is what they're saying. And also, you know, allyship is doing your homework, and not just doing your homework for the sake of saying that you joined a book club. It's doing your homework because if you did your homework, you'd realize that this conversation is the exact same conversation that Iga had in 1991, which is the exact same paper that Cheryl wrote in 1987. And it's like the answer is so like the answer has been there. The answer has been there since Black people, you know, had a sliver of power to ask for what we wanted. And so, you know, I think it's really about listening to Black people, taking a back seat, but also, you know, like listening to what we're saying, but not necessarily asking us for the answers either, unless you're paying us, because we've been giving you the answers for free, right? And so allyship is really what listening to what Black people actually want, doing the homework, and then, to Lindsay's point, surrendering resources and power and opportunity at all costs to serve the needs and wants of Black people.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to quickly comment on the last thing Vanessa said, which is listening to what Black people actually want. I would like to underline 10 times actually, because I have seen so many initiatives in the last month that we did not ask for. The most recent one being that realtors in Texas are not calling master bedrooms anymore. They're just calling them bedrooms. And I don't think that was ever on the list of asks. We wanted, you know, educational reform, police reform, or abolition, and instead we're getting these sort of weird and paltry answers to sort of solve the problem, and it's just making other bigger ones. And so I think actually taking time to listen and ruminate and think is a good place to start.
Mm-hmm. So I have a question for you guys from the audience. And the question is, so quote unquote, inclusion means we are including you into our whiteness. I find is so true, and also for accessibility. How can we differentiate inclusion in our personal design practices versus inclusive to a white able society? Yeah, something to ruminate on, actually.
That's heavy.
Yeah, I don't even have the answer to that question.
Can you repeat the last part again?
How can we differentiate inclusion in our personal design practices versus inclusive to a white able society?
My response would be, I think it matters, you know, what space you're in. In a space that from the very beginning has always been inclusive to marginalized voices and communities, you are more represented just because of who's in the room. I think if you're walking into a space that is traditionally white, able-bodied, and male, yes, you are being added to the fabric. I think it's much more about creating it versus being additive to what you're walking into, whether it is you know, a company or a community or, you know, a design group. I think it's about who's already there.
Yeah, and I think to kind of piggybacking off of this, and I hope that I'm answering this right. I mean, I almost think, and I guess when you know, I'm not fully sure what, you know, to what, I think a personal design practice can also look like so many different things depending on what design means to you. But, you know, for instance, I would say, I can give like an example in terms of thinking about personal design practice, right? Being a self-taught designer, I got to choose who to learn design from. So I didn't go to school and then learn about a bunch of white and European men who set the rules for what design was. Obviously, I'm impacted by it because everything that I look at is generally shaped by whiteness. So the things that I like, you know, I look at probably more Black art than the average designer, and I'm sure that I'm inspired, you know, and follow more Black designers. But I think it's thinking about, you know, when I set out to learn design, I started from my zero was, okay, how can I seek out Black people in my education? How can I seek out Black designers, Black art, Black aesthetic? How can I, like, you know, I'm a big fan of jazz, like, you know, bebop, hard bop jazz, like Blue Note jazz covers. Even though most Blue Note jazz covers are designed by white men, but, you know, but when I realized that, I then sought out, okay, well, who were the Black designers who designed jazz covers? very few, dismal. There's like literally maybe like just a hand, like less than 5, but I found them and I was like, I'm going to mimic your work. You know, I found who were the Black folks who were designing for independent labels, you know, back in like the 1980s, like who were the Black people who were designing protest flyers prior to me, you know? And so when I think about like being inclusive in your personal practice, again, I think kind of to Daj's point about what was already there. And I think if you're thinking about how can I include Blackness or just diverse perspectives in my design practice, maybe it's about just undoing it all. I think, you know, and I think it's like a larger thing of we have spent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years reinforcing a problem. We can't solve it in one conference. We haven't solved it in decades of uprising. We've been asking for the same thing. Like the undoing, I think we have to stop rushing to fix and pause, let Black people do their thing, because we're doing it, and then everyone else just give Black people the resources to do their thing, and then everyone else take a back seat and just like undo, like don't even think about being inclusive of your design process. Think about how can I undo everything I've learned in the past, you know, 4 years of my design education, 10 years, 20 years of my career, and start from zero. How can I, you know, like zap my brain, and then instead of thinking about how do I build an inclusive work environment or an inclusive personal design practice, now you're starting from it's diverse, it's inclusive from jump. And I think, you know, one of my favorite sayings is like, there's much to do and much to undo. And I think that in designing truly inclusive spaces where inclusivity of marginalized and people of color and Black voices are at the forefront, you have to start there. And if you haven't started there, then you have to go back so you can start again.
Yeah, 100%. I also think, you know, kind of going off what Vanessa is saying is you start to view, you know, your own design practice through the lens, you know, if you're not already, that it is whitewashed and that it is white centric, then, you know, you need to start there and acknowledge that, and then also examine the intent of your design before you move forward with the process, right? Like if you're just designing a graphic for the sake of designing a graphic for Instagram, that's very different than designing, you know, something that's calling to action that will actually help Black people, or that will actually help, you know, dismantle some of those structures. So I think that that's really where the conversation needs to start, through that lens of like, if you're sitting down to design, then like ask yourself those questions, like who is this really helping? And is it actually like, you know, something that is benefiting me, or is it actually constructive to the movement, to an individual, to an organization that has Black causes and interests in mind?
Wow. I wish I could delve into this more, because all of these responses are so amazing, and I actually have so many more questions, but we're running out of time. But this was a super awesome conversation, and I really want to thank you all for your time, and thank you for giving the audience insights and lessons on inclusion, diversity, and allyship, and just things that they can take back and reflect on within themselves and within their companies and workspaces and everything. So I unfortunately have to move on, so I'm going to let you guys go, but thank you so much.
Thank you for
having us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Of course, you guys are so amazing.